March of the Machine was just fully revealed, and it has a bonus sheet full of iconic legendary creatures from Magic's past in a special showcase frame for each. There's at least one of these multiversal legends in every pack, so you can expect to see a lot of these. So let's take a look at the top 10 most expensive cards you can pull from this slot. Let's jump into this starting with number 10, which is Aurelia, the Warleader. This card is currently going for $9.99, and it is a 6-drop red and white legendary creature angel 3/4 with flying, vigilance, and haste, and when it attacks for the first time each turn, untap all creatures you control. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase. Overall, this is a pretty good card. I mean, Boros legends aren't necessarily that popular as commanders, but any deck that has any form of caring about attacks or dealing combat damage or anything like that loves to run Aurelia as a way to get a second combat. In addition, it hasn't been reprinted in a major set outside of Double Masters 2022, which was very pricey, so this should bring down that price a lot from $10, probably down to somewhere around $5. So if you're looking to get your hands on this, now is a great time to do so. Overall, it's just a very awesome card for a lot of decks that care about combat. Alrighty, next up we have number 9, Yarok the Desecrated. This card's currently going for $9.99, and it is a 5-drop black, green, and blue legendary creature elemental horror that has Death Touch and Lifelink. And it says, if a permanent entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. So this is essentially Panharmonicon on a creature. This is a very popular commander and can be built in a lot of really interesting ways. You can just throw in a lot of the best ETB value creatures, you can make it a dedicated landfall deck, and overall, this is one of the most popular Sultai commanders in the game, so it's good to have it get reprinted and be able to get into more players' hands. I think Multiversal Legends are really great because Commander is the most popular format, and they are printing the centerpieces of people's decks, not only in cool frames, but also lowering the price by printing them at such a heavy volume. Either way, this is a great reprint to see, even if it is only $10 right now. Alrighty, at number 8 is Sheoldred, Whispering One. This is the original Sheoldred, and it's currently going for $12.99. It's a 7-drop 6/6 with Swamp Walk that says, at the beginning of your upkeep, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. And at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, that player sacrifices a creature. So every turn, your opponents are losing a creature, and every turn, you are getting one back from your graveyard. It is quite expensive at 7 mana, and so a lot of the time, it's not the commander of a deck, although there are definitely lots of Sheoldred commander decks. It's typically found in a deck that's already doing reanimation, and Sheoldred is one of the targets that's going to be reanimated, and if it's not dealt with, will reanimate something every turn. It's a value piece in reanimator decks, but outside of that, it's too expensive to see super serious play in any format. Moving on, we have number 7, which is Vorinclex, Voice of Hunger. This card's currently going for $13.99, and it's another one of the original Praetors cycle. It's an 8-drop green 7/6 with trample, and it says, whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana to your mana pool of any type that land produced. And whenever an opponent taps a land for mana, that land doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step, essentially doubling your mana and halving your opponent's. This one, if Sheoldred, was a tempo play, this one definitely helps you get ahead, basically making your mana 4 times more effective than your opponent's. It doesn't really see a lot of play as the commander of decks because, again, it is a monocolored thing and it's a very expensive card, but inside of decks that ramp heavily, this can be a finisher that basically stops your opponents from doing things and accelerates you towards the win. Overall, it's pretty expensive, but it has seen a couple reprints here and there, so it has fallen a lot since where it was like a year or 2 ago. Either way, still a great reprint and looks really, really awesome. Next up, we have number 6, which is Gitaxias Core Augur, another one of the original Phyrexian Praetor cycle. This one is currently going for $15.99, and it is a 10-drop blue 5/4 with flash that says, at the beginning of your end step, draw 7 cards, and each opponent's maximum hand size is reduced by 7. Overall, this one's really good, but similar to Sheoldred and Vorinclex before, it doesn't see a ton of play as a commander and instead is seen inside of decks that plan to cheat it out. While green can sometimes get away with having an 8-drop or a 10-drop by just ramping, blue doesn't have that luxury, so a lot of the time it has to be reanimated or cheated out through other means, and so this sees play in decks that want to cheat it out using things like braids. Overall, it provides a ton of value and is a really good card, and I'm glad to see it getting reprinted. Alrighty, next up, number 5 is Kroxa, Titan of Death's Hunger. This card's currently going for $17.99, and it is a 2-drop black and red legendary creature Elder Giant. It's a 6/6, and when it enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless it escaped. And whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, each opponent discards a card, then each opponent who didn't discard a non-land card this way loses 3 life. Then you can pay for it using its escape cost, which is black, black, red, red, and exile 5 other cards from your graveyard while it's in your graveyard to bring it back, and it'll actually stick around after that. This card is insane, and it's actually one that its price is propped up not by its commander play, but instead by its play in other formats. It is a pretty good commander, as you can kind of dodge commander attacks and keep bringing it back, and it can be a pretty good commander in that sense, but in lots of formats, this can be a very big, deal in discard-heavy strategies that look to control the board and strip their opponents of resources. Not only is this great for games that drag on, as it can repeatedly be resurrected as you put spells into your graveyard, but it also, just for 2, makes your opponent discard a card and potentially lose life if they choose to discard a land. It's just a very good card, and seeing it reprinted is really awesome, especially in this Theros frame, which it was never printed in before. Next up, number 4 is Skithiryx, the Blight Dragon. This card's going for $24.99, and it's a 5-drop legendary creature Phyrexian Dragon Skeleton 4/4 with flying and infect. Then you can pay a black and it gains haste until end of turn, and you can pay 2 black to regenerate it. What's really cool about this card is that it is the go-to infect commander, or at least it was before All Will Be One infected the format with more poison counters. But originally this was printed in Scars of Mirrodin and then saw a reprint in Double Masters. It hasn't seen a reprint since, and that's part of its high price tag at this point. But overall, it's a very powerful card because of the infect ability being in the command zone every game, and you can build a very potent commander deck around it. Plus, this art style is really, really awesome, and so seeing it on older cards is really cool as well. It's also the first time we're seeing the card with the Phyrexian type on it, since that was an errata that technically happened just a little bit ago. Either way, very, very awesome reprint. I'm happy to see it. Moving on, number 3 is Elesh Norn Grand Cenobite. It is not a top 10 list recently without Elesh Norn being on it, and this one is no exception. The card's currently going for $34.99, and it is a 7-drop white legendary creature Phyrexian Praetor 4/7 with Vigilance, and it says, other creatures you control get +2/+2, and creatures your opponents control get -2/-2. This is arguably the most powerful of the original Praetors, as it is a permanent effect that's giving your opponent's creatures -2/-2, literally disabling a ton of utility creatures in the format, and being an asymmetric board wipe. On top of that, it also just boosts your creatures up. I mean, if you just have a 1/1, that's now a 3/3, which is significantly more scary when all of your opponent's stuff is -2/-2. It kind of just alters the way the game is played and disables a lot of people's stuff. I mean, if your commander has 2 or less toughness, this literally says you don't have your commander anymore. Because of that, it's very, very powerful, but similar to the other Praetors, it's not often the commander of decks, and instead is found in the decks as a reanimation target or just a big splashy play to try and win the game with. Overall, it's an awesome reprint, has really cool art, and was starting to get up there in price, so it's good to see it come down a little bit. Next up, number 2 is Atraxa, Praetor's Voice. This is a green, a white, a blue, and a black for a legendary creature Phyrexian Angel Horror 4/4 with flying, vigilance, death touch, and lifelink. Then, at the beginning of your end step, you proliferate. This is one of the most popular commanders in the entire format, and it is pretty pricey already. It was going for $50 or $60 before it was announced to be in the set, and the price has fallen a little bit, now down to $44.99. This is good in a ton of different decks. You have +1/+1 counters? Proliferate them. You want to infect your opponents? Proliferate those. You want to run Planeswalkers? Up their loyalty counters. It is very, very good in a lot of styles of decks, and it has seen various reprintings over the years. Originally in Commander 2016, but then it was in Commander Anthology, and then it was in Double Masters, and then it was in a Secret Lair, and now it's in Multiversal Legends. This is one of those cards that no matter how many times it gets reprinted, it seems like the price just keeps going up on it, and so this is a really amazing reprint to see, especially in this new Capenna style, which is really, really cool. Alright, and finally, number 1 is Ragavan Nimble Pilferer. It's currently going for $74.99. This is a 1-drop red legendary creature monkey pirate 2/1 that when it deals combat damage to a player, you create a treasure token and exile the top card of that player's library. Until end of turn, you may cast that card. Then it has a dash, so for 1 in a red, you can cast it for its dash cost. If you do, it gains haste and is returned from the battlefield to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. This card is the Bane of Modern and is one of the best creatures ever printed in the game. The amount of value it gets you for 1 red mana is insane, and the fact that it has dash means that it can later on just keep being reused to keep getting value, and can't be threatened by sorcery speed removal or board wipes or cards like that. You know, the card was going for about $100 for a while, and, you know, it is slowly coming down in price, thankfully, due to the announcement of this reprint, but it definitely is the chase card for the entire set. It's so good it was banned in Legacy, and it's just an insane card no matter where you run it. You know, this is the definition of power creep, and it's only ever been printed in Modern Horizons 2, so this should be able to do a lot for the price. But that actually leads me into the final point. Those are the top 10, but do they matter? Do these Multiversal Legends reprints actually impact the prices? Well, I dove into that question specifically in a video a little while back, where I looked at the Strixhaven Mystical Archive and Brothers War Retro artifacts, so if you're curious about how prices of these will probably fall, check out that video where I break down exactly that, and you can also check out this video here where I talk about the top 10 most expensive normal cards from the set as well. See you in the next one. Bye.